Let me hide myself in thee.
Welcome to the Steady Anchor Podcast, a podcast on Christian faith and practice, highlighting doctrine and discipleship in the local church. I'm Luke, and welcome to the show. Welcome back to the Steady Anchor Podcast. I am Luke, your host. This is part 14 of our journey through the book of Proverbs. We're spending about 10 minutes a day every morning walking through the passage, the chapter of the day, just seeking out what God would say to us through that, trusting that He will give us wisdom and insight and help us to live a life that is holy and pleasing to Him, a life of wisdom. And so with that said, we're just going to dive straight in. This is Proverbs chapter 14 in the ESV. The wisest of women builds her house, but folly with her own hands tears it down. Whoever walks in uprightness fears the Lord, but he who is devious in his ways despises him. By the mouth of a fool comes a rod for his back, but the lips of the wise will preserve them. Where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but abundant crops come by the strength of an ox. A faithful witness does not lie, but a false witness breathes out lies. A scoffer seeks wisdom in vain, but knowledge is easy for a man of understanding. Leave the presence of a fool, for there you do not meet words of knowledge. The wisdom of the prudent is to discern his way, but the folly of fools is deceiving. Fools mock at the guilt offering, but the upright enjoy acceptance. The heart knows its own bitterness, and no stranger shares its joy. The house of the wicked will be destroyed, but the tent of the upright will flourish. There is a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way to death. Even in laughter the heart may ache, and the end of joy may be grief. The backslider in heart will be filled with the fruit of his ways, and a good man will be filled with the fruit of his ways. The simple believes everything, but the prudent gives thought to his steps. One who is wise is cautious and turns away from evil, but a fool is reckless and careless. A man of quick temper acts foolishly, and a man of evil devices is hated. The simple inherit folly, but the prudent are crowned with knowledge. The evil bow down before the good, and wicked at the gates of the righteous. The poor is disliked even by his neighbor, but the rich has many friends. Whoever despises his neighbor is a sinner, but blessed is he who is generous to the poor. Do they not go astray who devise evil? Those who devise good meet steadfast love and faithfulness. In all toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty. The crown of the wise is their wealth, but the folly of fools brings folly. A truthful witness saves lives, but one who breathes out lies is deceitful. In the fear of the Lord one has strong confidence, and his children will have a refuge. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, that one may turn away from the snares of death. In a multitude of people is the glory of a king, but without people a prince is ruined. Whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who has a nasty temper exalts folly. A tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, but envy makes the bones rot. Whoever oppresses a poor man insults his maker, but he who is generous to the needy honors him. The wicked is overthrown through his evil doing, but the righteous finds refuge in his death. Wisdom rests in the heart of a man of understanding, but it makes itself known even in the midst of fools. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. A servant who deals wisely has the king's favor, but his wrath falls on the one who acts shamefully. This is the word of the Lord. So continuing in Proverbs chapter 14, we see that it's again Proverbs, the general statements and sayings, the wise statements of King Solomon. In verse 2, we see uprightness fears the Lord. The one who walks in righteousness is the one who walks in a holy reverence for God. That seems like a given, but we have to understand that there are external signs of goodness that we may have in our society. That someone who generally follows laws, who's generally kind, who may seem like the person has it all together. We may consider that person to be a good citizen or a good neighbor, but ultimately, if they do not fear the Lord, then they are not upright. They are not righteous if there is no fear of God in their hearts. In verse 3, foolishness brings discipline and punishment. The mouth of a fool brings a rod for his back. It's because of the foolishness of the fool, because of their slander, because of their foolish talk, because of the problems that they cause. People always running their mouth gets into trouble. It brings discipline. It brings punishment. It gets them into trouble with the authorities because they don't know when to close their mouth. Verse 12. It's an important verse. It's a pretty famous proverb about man's sight and the way that it's limited, our limitations of understanding. It says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. So, according to this proverb, according to the scriptures, there are times when people will think something is good, will think something is righteous, something is profitable, something is the right thing. Like, if I do this, it will be good. If I don't do this, it will be good. But in the end, it leads to destruction, which is, again, why we need to continually seek after the wisdom that God has revealed to us through his word and through his creation, so that we won't be confused, so that we won't be misled by our own thinking, by our own wisdom, which in truth is foolishness, that God's wisdom is true wisdom. Verse 15, that we shouldn't believe everything that we hear. It says, the simple believes everything, but the prudent gives thought to his steps. So a simple person, a foolish person, one who is unlearned, who does not have insight, is one who just believes everything that he hears. You may think of the people on Facebook who are constantly sharing and spreading spam and fake news stories or satire and misunderstanding that it's not a real news story. People who always fall for the conspiracies and are just generally easy to fall prey to those kind of things. People who, unfortunately, are very gullible. And so that's a way of foolishness. That's a way of simpleness. But prudence, wisdom, insight, discretion, the person who walks in those ways gives thought to the way that they walk and the way that they think and the way that they speak. And so if for us to be wise means to not just accept everything. Like, don't believe everything you read on the internet. Don't believe everything you read in books. Test all things. Scripture calls us to test the spirits. To not readily accept anything just because it sounds right or it sounds good, but rather to be discerning what it's truly saying, how it conforms to the truth of God. Paul says that the believers in Berea were no more noble than the others in Thessalonica, because when Paul gave them the message of the gospel, they didn't just say, sounds cool, we'll believe it. Instead, they diligently searched the scriptures to see if it accorded with what God had already revealed to them. So that is wisdom, to seek things out for the truth. Verse 21, love your neighbor and be generous to the poor, because whoever despises his neighbor is a sinner. God has called us to love our neighbors sacrificially, to be generous with what we have, to give to those who are less fortunate than us, to give to live in hospitality, to give with all that Christ has given to us. We know that he's given us for what we have for a reason, to be wise stewards and to benefit others through it. We also see 26 and 27 that the fear of the Lord, which is a recurring theme in Proverbs, is confidence at life. It's where we find our hope and security, is in the fear of the Lord. Verse 30, that envy rots the bones. A tranquil heart is life, but envy makes the bones rot. Verse 31, whoever oppresses a poor man insults his maker. Now, it's not that, that every politician or every government or every big business is inherently wicked and evil, and, all the CEOs are corrupt and all this different stuff. But we know that there are people in power who take advantage of the less fortunate, people who don't have a voice, who don't have the money to protect themselves. And this is an insult to God himself. 34 as well. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. So that we as a nation state, obviously this verse isn't about America or whatever country you may be in. I know we have international listeners, but righteousness is a blessing to nations. That by our righteous actions, our country is blessed. And so if we want to love our neighbors well, we must live in a way that honors God, that conforms to his standard of righteousness. We hope that this video has been beneficial to you. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. If it has, please share with a friend. And please go and apply this to your day as best you can. God bless.